Hello and welcome to the AIM Webinar Series. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items to address. First, you'll notice you are muted throughout the presentation. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, so if you do have questions, please chat those to us by either using the Q&A option at the bottom of the app or sending a chat to AIM Member Services. Without further ado, AIM's excited to have Karen Fleshman, the founder and CEO of Cincore, here to discuss how the GS1 standards improve outcomes at the point of care. Karen, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Fleshman. I am founder and CEO of Cincore. What I'd like to do is start off by just saying thank you. There's a couple of people that I need to thank for allowing me to participate in this event. First, Jeannie Duckett from Avery Denison, Celine Joshi from GS1 US, also Michael and Mary Lou from the AIM team. I want to thank you all for allowing me to present today. Next, I'd like to start off with giving you just a little bit of background about Synchcor, formerly Haskins Advisory Group. We actually rebranded the company earlier this year. And we've actually been involved in GS1 probably for about 20 years. The company was started back in 2010, and myself and some of my employees and teammates actually are former GS1 employees, as well as former GS1 business process owners. We are actively involved in the GS1 healthcare group specifically. We have presented at the GS1 conferences where we've been speakers and also sponsors. We're in the Chicago area, and we've actually done some substantial work in Chicago as it relates to supply chain management and sustainability. We've been able to help Loyola University and also the City Colleges of Chicago to design their curriculum around including the GS1 standards in their supply chain programs. We also have a few GS1 certificates here. I certainly won't go through them, but the main purpose is just to let you know that we're GS1 solution partners and heavily involved in the community. So who we serve manufacturers and retail, food service, and also healthcare. We provide GS1 services as well as GDS and consulting, implementation, as well as managed services. For today, we're going to primarily just focus on our healthcare. So the purpose of this presentation is, for all of us in the GS1 space, we always get the question of, why are we doing this? Why is this important? So in the GS1 space, what we do for our clients is we help them to comply with the UDI final rule. And so my purpose for actually putting together this presentation is to basically connect the dots, between the implementation of the UDI and then also some of the work that GS1 is doing as it relates to the UDI and its impact, if you will, as it relates to point of care. There's a lot of work group activity that's going on in that space, and so just wanted to share some of that with you, as well as what's happening on the provider side. So what I'll be doing is providing just some background information on some of the case studies that have been implemented over the years, specifically for healthcare providers. So what it does is that connects the dots, from the manufacturer to GS1 and how GS1 helps facilitate the implementation of the GS1 standards so that providers are realizing benefits. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those benefits in a minute. Again, focus on healthcare providers today. So where did it all started? It basically started over 40 years ago. Those of you who have been in the space, that there have been very large manufacturers, for example, like Johnson & Johnson, and primarily they operate in multiple industries. And so they actually implemented the GS1 standards for their retail customers. And so, what you find is that it's been over 40 years where some of the healthcare manufacturers, group purchasing organizations and distributors, they've actually have implemented and have been using the GS1 standards they are ingrained in their organization. And so especially healthcare companies that are operating again in retail space as well, they've been using the barcodes, for almost half a century as it relates to going across point of care. Now that whole process has been extended, and what we're finding is to some extent it's the seamless process, to take that exact same barcode or UPC, if you will, and then to have it also scanned at point of care or at point of use. So as you, in 2013, I'm sure you're well aware of, the FDA's UDI rule, the UDI final rule that basically states that medical devices sold in the US, they must be marked with a unique device ID. And that there also must be marking as well on the label and also the package, and it must be machine readable as well as human readable. So that's basically what has drove the industry to say that we need to expand our identification of products to include the UDI. So the UDI, that expansion includes, you have the G10, which is the device identifier, and then you have a product identifier, which a manufacturer has a couple of different application identifiers that they can select as their product identifier. So that expansion includes, the barcodes of choice is primarily the GS1 Data Matrix, however, for, packaging and casing and logistics units, it extends, not only to the GS1 128, but, also to the SSCC as well, the serial shipping container code as well. Within the GS1 healthcare industry in the US, there's been a lot of work being done in the healthcare sector, of course, focused on manufacturers as well as providers. But again, this presentation is focused primarily on providers. And so what the GS1 US Initiative, it represents just a broad range of, industry stakeholders. There's over 140 participants or members, if you will, and their businesses and their organizations pretty much run the gamut as it relates to healthcare. Manufacturers, distributors, providers, pharmacies and GPOs, government agencies, as well as industry, and then also solution partners are working together, to address challenges within the healthcare supply chain with the GS1 standards, with the primary focus on safer patient care, improved internal operational efficiencies, and then, of course, enhanced data quality. So within the GS1 Point of Care work group, there was quite a bit of work that was done to help facilitate the process of implementation of the standard specifically for providers. And as with any capital project or major project within an organization, they've identified the step-by-step process, and they've actually have realized a lot of success with this particular process of implementation for the GS1 standards at the point of care, at the scanning of the point of care. So like any other major project within an organization, it always starts off with executive support. I mean, that's there's no place to go except for that. That's the start of it all. And then once that happens, of course, you have to form a team. And what you'll see in the presentation is that, these cross-functional teams have been very effective, really collaborating and working together, to improve not only efficiencies in operations, but also when it relates to the point of care, what's happening with the actual patient and capturing that information as it relates to the patient, and inventory management from the perspective, was the actual product used in the OR, and if it wasn't, it can actually be put back into inventory. Of course, communication, point number 3 here, develop a communication plans, to all of the stakeholders and all of the entities, of course, that will be affected, so that they understand the process and the progress, as well as the process and the testing and the feedback. Also, of course, you have to assess your current environment and evaluate the readiness and determine what the gaps are and what you need to do, to move the project, the initiative forward. Identification of the devices and capturing that data in the master data systems is critical. Moving down to number 6 here, of course, establishing pilots, with particular manufacturers to ensure that it is a seamless flow, as well as to address any issues that may occur. And then most importantly, to ensure that the process is repeatable. 7, conducting tests, ensuring that the actual UDIs that can be scanned, and that when that UDI is scanned, that the data is actually recorded in the electronic healthcare record. And then something that's equally as important here is developing a standard operating procedure, so that these processes aren't dependent on individual people, that they're actually documented and that they are repeatable. Next, what I'd like to go into, excuse me, is some of the results of all of the work that's being done as it relates to GS1. And I felt that it was important to give this presentation primarily because, we hear about all of the challenges, and we hear about how do you quantify this? What's the ROI on the time of implementing these, the time, the resources, financial, and as well as human resource. What is the value? What's the payoff? And so what I like to do is to to cover some case studies, and these case studies are available on the GS1 US website. So anyone can have access to them. And my reason for, just locating these specific case studies, because I felt like they tell, a very good story about how, I would say, providers from with various sizes, from small community hospitals, on to more larger research centers, if you will, and then, research centers. So I wanted to kind of show a contrast. And then I'll also will show a case study from a regulatory agency. So I'll start here with Centrostate. Centrostate is a community hospital that is in New Jersey, and even though they are a smaller, more again community hospital, they face the challenge, this exact same challenges of any other hospital, and size basically doesn't matter as it relates to the standards and the FDA's requirements to implement compliance requirements. So the challenge that they faced was that they needed to meet the the regulatory requirements. And so where they decided to start was to automate the capture of product data used in the operating room. I apologize for that. I got a lot of background and got a lot of things going on here in the background. I do apologize for that. I hope you can hear me. So Centrostate, as I stated, they have the same compliance and business imperatives as any larger healthcare system. You know, they're concerned about patient safety and cost containment, you know, at the exact same level. So the solution that they ultimately came up with was to create a cross-functional team, a team consisting of clinicians and supply chain professionals, as well as technologies professionals. And what they did was develop processes and protocols to utilize the G10 as the unique identifier to identify medical devices and other products used by their surgical teams, you know, in the OR room, in the operating room. The results of these benefits, the results and the benefits of this implementation is that Centrostate was able to see some substantial improvement. They actually they now have the ability to quickly and accurately identify products used throughout the supply chain, which enables them to satisfy the regulatory requirements for medical devices. They're able to update the patient EHR. The hospital has benefited from an increase in patient safety, improved staff productivity. And then again, they're able to precisely and inclusively capture costs at the point of care and at the point of use. All of this combined has increased their trust within their community. So as it relates to their current process or their former process, which is on the left, you know, they actually had staff that were actually keying in data, you know, into a system, you know, but now through, you know, a barcode scan, they have substantially reduced the time of capturing medical device data, as well as product data that is brought into the operating room. Next case study is Mercy. And Mercy's challenge was similar, but in the sense that they were looking to improve patient safety and improve their internal operation. And as you know, there's this transformational change that is brought about, you know, as it relates to increasing the need for careful stewardship of resources associated with regulations that are defining basically the future, you know, of patient care and safety. So in order to ensure consistent high quality care, Mercy wanted to improve internal operations throughout their health system. And so what they were able to do through the implementation and the adoption of the standards, Mercy was able to realize benefits, and actually they were able to build out, a digital infrastructure that allowed them to address their compliance, their costs, and as well as their patient care needs. Through and of course, to provide high quality service or high quality patient care. So that's really critical. So these are just some of the results that they realized as a result, results that they were able to obtain by implementing the GS1 standards. And so one key point here is that you'll notice is that, really recognizing inventory assets. When products weren't being used, or devices and products weren't being used, they developed a process whereby they could actually ensure that those products got put back into inventory. And then also from charge capturing, they were able to optimize their ability to capture charges, at the time of usage. For example, if a particular device was being used, during a procedure, they could scan that. They could actually scan that device, and that data related to the device would actually be ingested into the electronic health record. And so those are things that were primarily being done manually in the past. And now through the implementation of the standards, they're able to, realize cost savings, as well as more improved staff satisfaction, and reductions in cycle time, and automated replenishment of products. So there's, Mercy again, just realized quite a bit of opportunity for improvement, as a result of implementing the standards. So, again, and my purpose is to just show that, it's happening, right? It may be a slow process, but I think with GS1 leading the, kind of leading the path here, with establishing specific programs, actionable programs that providers can use to walk them through the process, and then also bringing in solution partners, that can help facilitate, these type of major cost savings, as well as efficiency improvements, and compliance needs. All of those efforts working together, is and will continue to expand the implementation of the GS1 standards for healthcare providers. Next, I'd like to go on to the CDC, and we've been hearing, a lot about these guys lately, right? And the CDC's challenge was to, promote patient safety by helping providers to do a better job of recording vaccine information in the patient record. So the solution that was implemented was the encoding of the GS1 Data Matrix barcode so that it was scanned, that the actual vaccine vials were scanned, as well as the syringes, and that this information was captured into the patient record. The benefit: improved immunization process for providers. Again, just another opportunity for some substantial, improvements here. especially with COVID, as we know, millions of people are being vaccinated, and they're being vaccinated by hundreds of thousands of clinicians. And so the question is how is a healthcare provider capturing that information? And so the CDC actually launched two projects. The first one was a pilot that was designed to test how vaccine data could be used to scan vials and also syringes. And then that data to be populated into the electronic health record. The second project, the GS1 Data Matrix barcode facilitated was what is called the Global Document Type Identifier. And we don't hear a lot about this, because there are some GS1 keys that are used substantially more than others. And so what the Global Document Type Identifier is, it actually identifies process, and it can be captured on paper. And so what we see here is the actual GS1 standards in action. And so this is for the rubella vaccine. And as you can see here, there's a GS1 data matrix barcode that's capturing, all the information from these sheets. And yeah, I do apologize for all the noise in the back. As part of the GS1 standards capturing this information, again, when we think about COVID, we can only hope that this process is implemented for COVID, that there is a similar GS1 data matrix barcode that has been designed, to capture all of the vaccine information that's related to COVID. So, yeah, that's my hope, at least. So with that, those are the case studies that I wanted to show you. As I stated, they're all on the GS1 US website at gs1.org. My company was not involved in any of the implementations of these projects and initiatives, but again, I thought it was just really important to share that. There is a lot of progress being made. And as I stated earlier, those of us who are in the GS1 space, we know firsthand how the standards are changing industry for better. And again, I just wanted to share, again, some case studies of what we're seeing. So as I stated earlier, we work with manufacturers. And so when manufacturers ask the question about, how is this data used and why is this important, I have the ability to go to these case studies, and help them to see real life examples, of how their upfront effort to implement the UDI, is actually finding its way through the supply chain all the way to the healthcare providers, well beyond their inventory management, but on to, the point of use as well as the point of care. So with that being said, I would like to take questions if you have any, if anyone has questions.
All right, thank you, Karen, for your time and insights today. Really appreciate it. And everyone still has some time to submit some questions if you have them. If you look at the bottom of the application for Zoom webinar, there is a chat and a Q&A option. You can send those to us using either method. But to get things started, Karen, the first question we have is, why do you think it's taking so long for healthcare providers to implement the efficiencies and cost savings you discussed?
Well, From my perspective, and again, having been in this space for quite a few years, actually going on like 20 years, from a healthcare perspective, I think that it actually is a lot more challenging, because not only do they're implementing other major capital projects that are primarily focused on diagnostics of patients. And so I think that they actually have to have a clear understanding of the benefits of implementing the standards. And I think at this point, there's more stories need to be told, right? You know, um, once you see one healthcare provider is doing something great and that they are implementing and finding, realizing efficiencies and as well as cost savings and having the ability to actually ingest data, electronically into the health record. I think that more and more providers will start moving in the direction, but again, their focus is saving lives, right? It's a lot more substantial than, going into a store to get, a product or spaghetti or something like that, and so their cause is higher. And so their risk is much greater. And I think that there is what I would consider um, so they're working, when you think about it, it's the diagnostics of, patient illnesses, versus, operational efficiency. And I'm thinking that the former takes precedent. So, but I do think, that there is some work being done. There's more. And I think that as we continue to tell these stories, more providers will adopt the standards.
Okay, thank you. Do you see government agencies such as the FDA or the MDA requiring healthcare providers to implement more programs to help identify and track products?
Well, I think that most of this is being driven by government agencies, right? The UDI, is a requirement, and some may feel that it's optional, but in thinking that it's optional, then you run the risk of being audited and all the ramifications that come behind that. But I think that the government agencies are accelerating the process of implementing unique identifiers throughout the supply chain. And so I think that definitely will continue. We see UDI efforts all over the world, and I'm not seeing that slowing down. I'm not seeing that slowing down. I'm only seeing that it's increasing because there's a lot of challenges with the supply chain from the perspective, of recalls and traceability, of defective products and counterfeit products, within the supply chain. And so it's really critical that that those type of situations, those issues, that they be addressed. And I think that these regulatory agencies are making the effort to make sure that happens.
Great. And do you know which territories the GS1 implementation has reached at this point?
Yes. So as it relates to healthcare specifically, of course, there's quite a bit going on in the US. But as a part of the GS1 Healthcare Initiative at the global level, there is some substantial, impressive work that's going on all over the world as it relates to implementation of the GS1 standards. So what they do within GS1 Healthcare at the global office level, they have periodic webinars whereby providers actually, will present their implementation to the community. And some of these implementations or case studies, if you will, have been very, very impressive. Yeah, I'm just reminded of one from Amsterdam where they were able to actually trace the identification of products and how they were able to save 47 lives, and they could quantify that. And I mean, that's a amazing. You may say that that's a small number, but if it's your family, then it's substantial, right? And so there's a lot of work being done all over the world. And I focused on the US because, of course, that's where we're located. But again, there is some equally impressive work that's being done all over the world. And there are case studies, on the gs1.org website that will help you, you can actually go to see some of those remarkable case studies.
Great, thank you. Another question we received is, are you seeing a challenge with different interpretations of the UDI regulations? How do you suggest we get everyone on the same page?
Well, the regulation is clear. So there's no ambiguity there in terms of, what you need to do to be compliant. I think from my perspective in working with manufacturers is that the effort, it takes effort, right? You have to pull together a project team. You have to look for data that you may not even have. And so like any initiative or any project, it takes a lot of effort. And so, a lot of healthcare manufacturers, they're in the process of, implementing new products and, and that's their focus. And so what happens is that in some cases, they're willing to take the risks, of like not being audited and the FDA not enforcing, the compliance. And so, with that being the case, I mean, that's definitely like their option. But to the point, the rule is clear. It's clearly outlined, what the requirements are to be compliant. But I think again that some manufacturers, and again, that's my space where we work, is they're not willing, to put the time and effort for the implementation, primarily because they feel that what is the likelihood of the FDA actually auditing me? And then I always respond with, what is the likelihood of a recall on your product? And so they have to be sold on why they need to do this work. And so that's why these case studies are so important, because again, it connects the dots, between, the effort that they're putting in and implementing the UDI all the way down to what happens at the healthcare providers, facilities. So yeah, there's no confusion with the, with the rule.
Yep. Another question we have is, do you see organizations exploring other technologies such as RFID or fixed industrial scanners to complement barcoding?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, the ideal scenario would be RFID, right? So that, there is no need for that handheld scanner. So the people in the OR, they're not actually, like physically scanning the product. So RFID is definitely the way to go. unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any case studies specifically related to healthcare, healthcare usage of the RFID, because when you think about, the RFID, the fact that, the operating cart has arrived into the operating room, everything on that cart that has a barcode, that data is actually captured. So that is like a panacea, right? That's definitely the direction to go. But you have to, start where you are, right? And so, I think this first phase, being, the implementation, of the standards primarily through the UDI, as well as, within other industries, for example, the pharma, through the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, you think about, the G10. So, when you think about it, it's there, right? But so you have the UDI that's moving all the way through the supply chain, and that's the key point that I want to really kind of just drive home here.
Great. Another question we do have is labeling requirements have changed. What advice do you give providers who have products on the shelf that do not meet today's requirements?
Okay, so actually within the rule, it speaks to that as well. It speaks to the fact of inventory, right? And products that or devices that that are in inventory today and may not, meet the compliance requirement. I think the key thing is to look at the class of device. So, class 3 and class 2. I mean, they, their deadline was quite a few years ago, actually. And so if you have class 3 and class 2 devices that are in the supply chain, and they are not properly labeled, I would suggest that you over label them, whereby you create new labels for those products, because the key thing is that if there is a recall, the manufacturer has the responsibility of tracking those products and pulling them from the shelf. And so, if the label is not compliant today, I would say if you're a class 3 and a class 2 manufacturer, you want to relabel those products. Class 1's, a lot more low risk. And then you also have some flexibility as it relates to the enforcement, of the rule. But class 2 and class 3, I would highly suggest that you relabel those devices.
Another question we have too is, how do you think UDI will get implemented for non-sterile orthopedics?
I'm sorry, non-sterile what?
Non-sterile or orthopedics.
That's a really good point, because non-sterile, there's of course a lot more leniency with non-sterile devices. However, having worked with sterile as well as non-sterile, there are some exceptions, if you will, but I would suggest, exploring like what the exceptions are for your particular category of product, because even though you're non-sterile, in some cases you may not need to comply, but you need to really do the research on your particular class of your, not only your class, but also your category, more importantly, your category of product, to determine, what the labeling requirements are for your category of products.
Great. Another question we have is, has the rule been updated to include adhesion and durability of the label?
That's, you know what, actually, that's a good question. And I can't speak to that because I'm not aware of an update. I know that there has been some communication about it. Yeah, but I haven't seen anything, specifically, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, and another question we have is, what is the GS1 relationship with private and public health insurance claims determination?
Well, actually, for me, I'm not aware of any, connection, or I'm not aware of any. I think that, yeah, if that's something that you're interested in knowing more about, you may want to, call GS1, but I'm not aware of any, connection or collaboration. But that's not to say that there's nothing happening. It's just that, I'm not aware of it. And, as I stated earlier, we're focused on medical device manufacturers, and that's our sweet spot, if you will. And yeah, and that's where, again, like, that's our focus. So I'm not sure about, these other, entities that you refer to. So again, I would suggest, calling GS1 and, to determine if there is some type of connection.
Okay, great. And we'll end on this question. Are these recalls based on FDA UDI noncompliance or the GS1 labeling?
Oh, so recall is going to be based on, of course, the FDA, the federal agency, that governs this whole process. So if there's a recall, the FDA has the ability to, recall a device, as well as, a manufacturer, working with a healthcare provider. Again, going back to the point I was making earlier about connecting those dots, whereby, they identify that a provider, through the implementation of the GS1 standards, they have the ability, provided that their implementation has extended that far, where they can identify, like, adverse situations as it relates to a particular device. And when that happens, they have the ability to go back to the manufacturer, to say that a particular device, is, defective or may require, some type of review. And when that happens, the manufacturer can do a review of the actual device, and they can determine themselves that, there is a defect, and they decide that they want to make a recall. So GS1 is not in the business of recalling devices or products or anything like that. GS1 is in the business, of facilitating, a common language across industries, whereby, again, connecting the dots, from the manufacturer, down all the way to the provider. So yeah, GS1 doesn't do recalls.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and insights today, Karen. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. And if there's any questions for me, actually, I wanted to let you know that as it relates to these case studies, like I said, they're out there. They're on the GS1 websites. And also, if you're interested in getting involved in any of the GS1 work groups as it relates to healthcare, those are also available, always looking for new members. And then here, is my contact information, just in case you have any questions for me. And again, I want to thank you for taking your time. I hope this was interesting and insightful. And just the key thing is that all of this information is public, and it's on the GS1 US as well as the GS1.org websites.
Thank you again, Karen, and thank you to the audience for their active participation today.
You're very welcome.